Hi, welcome to Enter the Bunker, where we launch you into thriving. Each week we talk about a different virtue that can be used as a building brick to build your own personal bunkers. We share personal stories, as well as tips and tricks to help you thrive instead of survive. So sit down, relax, and enter the bunker.
Hello and welcome to Enter the Bunkers part 2 of flexibility. Today we're going to get into how to practice flexibility. My name is Kelly.
And I'm Jonathan. Super flexible right here.
Doing the wave with your arms. Okay, we have 3 ways. We'll go over each one and then we'll talk about each one.
Awesome.
The first one, think of new ways of doing things. 2, don't insist on always getting your own way. 3, adjust when something unexpected happens. I feel like we just talked about like all these things kind of in our last episode, but maybe we can go into more detail.
Let's.
There's an interesting quote. A flexible mind can find answers in problems, understanding in confusion, and possibilities in limitation. Training your mind to be more flexible is easy if you try and think of new ways of doing things. Just because you've done something one way doesn't mean there isn't a better way of doing it. But if you never think of new ways, you'll never come across that better way. And I don't necessarily think you always have to think of that idea either. I think you have to be open to other people's ideas.
Sure.
Yeah.
Everybody always has an opinion about something.
But that might even make you not want to do it even more because it didn't come from you. It was their opinion. So that could be even harder to be flexible.
Yes, it could be difficult when the idea isn't yours.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. And you think that, somebody's telling you what to do, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but to come up with new ways of how to do things, there's lots of ways that could happen. In terms of doing it, in terms of doing it as like how you can improve it for yourself to build your own building brick. Probably a good idea to look at searching out ways that are out there. Like if you have something that's going on, rather than just figuring it out for yourself, there's lots of information on the internet. There's lots of people out there that experience the same sort of thing. Join communities, that have similar interests to yours, and then from there you can get a lot of different ways to be able to handle things. I think of a handyman who. There's always these different challenges when you're a handyman and having to fix things, but you talk to like 5 different handymen and you'll probably get 5 different ways that you could do something.
You guarantee we'll get 5 different ways.
Yeah.
Maybe 6.
Yeah.
7.
So it's all about being able to be exposed to knowing that there's many different ways to solve something. So being part of communities that have like similar interests, that allows you to be able to find new ways to be able to do things.
Yeah.
And that way you can have more flexibility when it comes to how you approach.
Yeah. Being part of a good community.
There you go.
Okay, number 2, don't insist on always getting your own way. Funny, I actually just said to my friend last night, I feel like I've been stomping my feet for the past 2 years like a big baby, and now I'm finally getting my way. Anyways, one way of coming up with new ways of doing things is to listen to others.
Right.
You do not know everything. You do not always know the best way. But if you take a collaborative approach and listen and understand what others can contribute, the depth of knowledge is greater than going at it alone. Exactly what you just said. As long as it is still in pursuit of the end goal, working together and being flexible in your approach to reach your goal will make reaching your goal that much easier. I don't know about easier.
Well,
Could have been harder.
Yeah,
But it makes reaching your goal that much more satisfying, or?
So it's more about, being flexible. Sometimes some people have difficulty in being flexible because they really become attached to their own way.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
But that's where you start to insist, and when you start to insist in it being just like your way or no other way at all, that becomes a hindrance then. And oftentimes that's where you're the mighty oak again, and you're just going to get, when there's a problem, you're just going to get hit hard, right? So being able to listen to other ideas and perspectives really helps with coming up with like, I mean, sometimes you have plan A, but you got to have plan B,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
sometimes other people can see perspectives on things better than you can.
Yeah.
So having a willingness to listen to that is important. So I'm just going to speak from some experience. You also have to consider who you're getting this input from.
Okay.
So for example, when it comes to working with blockchain, for example, and dealing with developers around the world and dealing with complex systems and designing things and whatnot,
Yeah.
sometimes sometimes it's very difficult to get input on some things because the systems you're working with are so complicated that a lot of people just don't have the capacity to understand it.
Right. Yeah.
Not saying that they're dumb. It's just that it's just not in their repertoire. It's not what it's not their training. It's not their background, or they haven't spent the time on it.
Yeah. Or they're not as interested in it.
The same way that's the same way that you have done, right? And so then you have a unique perspective at that point where you're just like, okay, this is the way we should go.
Yeah.
And then getting feedback on that becomes very difficult.
Right.
Because there's just so much more that has gone into the way that you've set. Somebody else's input off the cuff doesn't address like the dozens of other complicated things that you've already factored into that.
Right.
So for a lot of people who are professionals in various backgrounds, and especially when it comes to development and things like that, it's very difficult to get this kind of flexible feedback because not everybody has that kind of expertise and capacity to actually have meaningful feedback, right?
Yeah.
They could have an idea and whatnot, but it ends up not being that effective. So you have to have some you have to have a little bit of good sense, to understand where the source is, right? So you want to be getting feedback from someone who's actually put in the same kind of work that you have, so that it's like, okay, yeah, they are factoring a lot of things, and okay, they caught something that I missed.
Yeah.
Then yes, you should be flexible enough to accept that. It's difficult for people who are in professional backgrounds who are in some kind of profession where they put so much effort into it, they have difficulty in accepting some other opinion that hasn't put in that kind of effort.
Right. That's understandable. So like, have you ever gone into a room or gone to somebody to get their expertise, but then you end up kind of answering your own question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, it happens quite often where I'll actually I'll have a question, and then I'll go to ask it, and then as I ask it, I suddenly get the answer to myself.
Yeah. Or even because you're talking about who you're going to for this. I find sometimes it's nice to just have, I don't know if you're necessarily going to them for expertise, but you're kind of going to them to bounce ideas off.
Sounding boards.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, it's a soundboard where you're not necessarily there to hear their opinion, but you're there to be heard.
Yes.
And to
get an idea.
Reflection back, right? Yeah. So because I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Oftentimes, that's exactly what happens with me, where I have to explain something to somebody, and by going through that process of trying to explain to someone, then I actually do discover, the answers to things that I needed, or I end up finding ways to be able to better communicate it.
Right.
So yeah, sounding boards, and it's not a derogatory term. Like serving someone as a sounding board is actually very good, because you have to be a very active and good listener to do that. Yeah. So there's some people that you find in your life that are just good at that, and you want to really have them in your life, because they just, even though they may not say much, actually providing a lot of help and feedback.
And they might not be getting everything that you're saying, but they are. That's interesting. Good. Okay, let's do number 3. Adjust when something unexpected happens. You've set your course, you have your plan to reach your goal, you embark on the journey and plodding happily along your course. Boom! Something unexpected happens and stops you in your progress. Take the time to assess what caused the unexpected thing to happen. Was your plan the cause of the problem, or was it random? Will adjusting your approach correct it and allow for continued progress? If you've tried the same thing again and again, would it result in the same outcome? You will only know the right answers to these if you are flexible enough to look for them. Assuming your way is the right way and the only way dooms many to failure.
Yes.
So that again, I feel like this kind of ties into the other 2 things we've talked about. They all tie into each other, obviously.
Obviously, yes.
So you're practicing, then you kind of got to practice all of them to become the flexible person.
Right.
Do you think it's common for a person more common or less common for something to boom, something happened and you're stopped dead in your tracks? Do you think it's more common for a person to stop what they're doing and say, screw it? Or, okay, I'm going to climb this mountain, or I'm going to go around this mountain, I'm going to build a bridge, I'm going to be flexible? What do you think is more common that people regularly do for when things come up like that?
I think the most common thing for most people is they cry like babies.
And stomp their feet.
I mean, when you look at social media, that's what you see,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like everybody's like, rah, rah, rah,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, that's what's most common,
Right.
And this is why a lot of people are not flexible, and they end up in a state where they are just stuck,
Yeah.
right? And so they cry about the storm around them, and they just don't do anything, and then just go and complain to their friends and tell everybody how terrible it is that they're in this, and then they just go nowhere,
Yeah.
right? And so then the whole time they could have just been spending that time actually being flexible and be like, okay, well, how do I resolve this? How can I get through this? What are the other ways?
Yep.
And if people can ask those questions, and maybe even have a soundboard of somebody who could actually talk to them through whatever it is they're going through with the intent to be flexible and actually find a solution,
Mm-hmm.
then they can be in a much better space, like both mentally as well as like in the direction they're taking.
Right.
But truthfully, most people, they just don't do that. There's a saying actually. So there's, I learned this saying that you should be like the bison.
Be like the bison.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you look at how, what happens when there's a storm coming, cows,
Yeah.
if you've ever seen a herd of cows, what happens is they all come together
And lay down.
and they'll cry. They'll be as the storm is coming, right? And they're just kind of cowering together because they're just afraid of the storm,
Oh,
right? It's sad.
it breaks my heart.
The bison
Yeah.
don't do that though.
What did the bison do?
The bison actually charge towards the storm because they know the sooner they get to the storm and get through it, the sooner it'll
It's
be over. So be like the bison, don't be like cows, right? So it's really, if you have the
Interesting.
flexibility to be able to see through that and just charge through it,
Yeah.
then you can be like the bison,
Yeah.
right?
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning with us for part 2 of flexibility. Who knew flexibility was more than just doing the splits? We will see you next week with integrity.
Integrity.
Stay tuned.
We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to Enter the Bunker. Make sure to follow us on Instagram where you can share your story and also look at behind the scenes of how we make our podcast. You can watch the video version of this podcast on YouTube by simply searching Enter the Bunker. Tune in next time as we launch into thriving.